For this video, we'll be using pink, purple, black, and white yarn, a 4mm crochet hook. We have 2 eyes and a nose, stitch markers, a darning needle, a pair of scissors, fabric glue, and a toothpick. The stitches used in this tutorial include the single crochet, double crochet, triple crochet, increase, decrease, slip stitch, magic circle, and a chain stitch. When sewing the Hello Kitty Vampire together, there will be 2 options. Option 1 is where she's standing, facing forward, and then we have option 2, where she has a side view and looks like she could fly. Now we're going to make Hello Kitty shoes. So here we're going to make black shoes. Hopefully you can see this. We're going to start with a magic circle. And then we're going to do 8 single crochets in our magic circle. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then we're going to pull our tail, bring all of the crochets together, and then we're going to work on our next row. For our next row, we're going to do single crochets all the way around. We're going to start with our first single crochet, and then we're going to put our stitch marker, and our second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and 8th. And our circle is coming undone again, so we're going to tighten up our magic circle, and then we're going to flip our shoe over. And now we're going to make the legs. We're going to do a color change to white. So we're going to insert our hook back into our loop, and then we're going to remove our stitch marker, and then we're going to go into this first crochet, and we're going to yarn over and pull through, and then we're going to get our white yarn. So here we have our white yarn, and then we're going to pull through 2 loops, and then we're going to get ready to crochet our next stitch. So we're just going to continue with single crochets. There's our first single crochet, our second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and here's our 8th. So we have our 8 single crochets, and we can cut our black yarn off now. We'll just tuck it in the shoe. And then we're going to continue with another 8 single crochets, and we're going to do this 3 rows. So here's our first single crochet. We're going to put our stitch marker on there. We're going to continue making 8 single crochets all the way around, and when we have 3 of our stitch markers, that means we've completed 3 rows of our 8 single crochets. Number 8. And now we're finished with our leg, and we're going to sew this on to our plushie, but first we're going to need 2 legs. Once we're finished with our 2 legs, we're going to add some stuffing. So I'm going to use the bottom of our crochet hook to put the stuffing in there. Okay, that's well stuffed, and we'll do this side. And then we're going to sew our leg on. So we're going to start with this leg here. And we have our dress, and here I forgot to tuck the end in. So let me get the darning needle. So here we have our darning needle. I'm just going to tuck this right into the body. And now that we're done with that, we're ready to add on our leg. So if you left the tails on, you can just use that. Otherwise, just start with a new piece of yarn. We're going to go into this middle here. And then go out. And then we're going to go into the next stitch on the leg. And then we're just going to sew it right into the side here. So here we're going to go into this previous stitch and to the next on the body. So then we're going to go into the previous stitch and the next stitch on the leg. And then on the body, the previous and the next stitch. And then on the leg, the previous and the next stitch. Then on the body, previous and the next. And back to the leg. And we want to make sure we pull that tight. And then we're going to continue until we get to the end of the leg. So once we get to the beginning where we started on the leg, we're just going to take our yarn. It's gotten really short here. And then we're just going to tuck that into the leg. Just put it back in there. And then we're done sewing on our first leg. And then we're going to do the same with our other side. Once we're finished with adding her 2 legs, we're going to stuff the body. So here we have our stuffing, and we're just going to place it into the body. Pretty stuffed in here. So now that we have her body stuffed, we're ready to add her head. So now that we're done with our head and our body, we're going to attach them together. I put these stitch markers around the bottom of the head so I know which stitches to go into. I counted out 16 stitches around so that it matches the 16 stitches on our neck area. So we're just going to place them together. And here I'm going to get our knitting needle and go into the middle, both the head and the body. And that'll secure our head on so that we can sew the body and head together. So I'm going to take the darning needle and go through this stitch on the neck, and I'm going to pull up enough yarn so that we can go around the head. And then I'm going to go into the stitch where the stitch marker is on the head and into the next stitch. And then I'm going to go back into the stitch on the neck where we started. And then I'm going to go back into the head and then into the next stitch. Then I'm going into the body on that previous stitch and into the next stitch. Then back into the head, into the previous stitch, and into the next stitch following my stitch markers. Then I'm going back into the previous and into the next on the body. And the previous and next on the head following my stitch markers. I'm going to tighten this up. And then I'm going to continue to make these stitches around the head. And once we get to our final stitch here, we can tie our ends together. I'm going to put it in a knot. Here we're going to cut our yarn. And then we're going to tuck our knot inside of the body. And I'll remove this stitch marker. And here we're finished with our Hello Kitty with her head sewn on, and now we're going to make the arms. To make our arms, we're going to start with a magic circle. And inside our magic circle, we're going to do 6 single crochets. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's our 6th single crochet. Then we're going to pull our tail to make our magic circle. For our next row, we're going to make 6 single crochets all the way around, and we're going to make 4 rows of 6 single crochets. So we're going to start with our first single crochet, and then add our stitch marker, and then we're going to continue making these single crochets all the way around, and when we get up to our 4th row, we'll have 4 stitch markers with it each indicating that there's a row of 6 single crochets. So here we're going to finish this row of 6 single crochets, And we're going to turn it around to make sure we have the right side up as we make the next rows. Once we have our arm the right side up, we're going to continue making our rows of 6 single crochets, and we'll meet back when we have 4 rows of them completed. Now once we have our 4 rows of 6 single crochets, we're going to remove our stitch markers and then move on to our next row. We're going to start our next row with a decrease. We're going to add our stitch marker. Then we have our 3rd stitch. It's a little bit difficult here to get to all the stitches. Then our 4th stitch. And here we have our 5th and our 6th stitch, and we're going to do a decrease. And now we're finished with our arm. We're going to pull out the end here, and we'll use this end tail to sew on our arms, and we're going to make another one of these so we have 2 arms. Now that we completed both of our arms, we're ready to put them onto our Hello Kitty. Here I have the yarn that's attached to the arm, and I'm just going to put it through the stitch on the other side and back into the side we started on. So it's just like an extra stitch. And then I'm going to place it onto the Hello Kitty. We're going 1 stitch down from the neck. So I'm just going to place it here. I'm going to go into the stitch. Then I'm going into the arm. And then we're going into this next stitch here, the 2 stitches, and then back into the arm, like to the other side of the arm. And I'm going to tighten that up. And I'm going to go back into the stitch here. So I'm going into the stitch where we started from the ending stitch. So we're going from the ending stitch to the beginning stitch. And then I'm just going to go back into the arm. Then we can just cut our yarn. And here we're done with sewing on our arm. And we're going to do the next arm. And now we're ready to add our nose and eyes to our Hello Kitty. We'll start with the nose, which goes in the middle, and we're going to start 5 rows up. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so we're going to put our nose here. And normally I don't like to use these pegged eyes and nose, because you can't make it as precise as you can with the flat backs. But since I don't have those, we're going to use these. And since I've already closed up the face, we're going to glue these. So we're going to add glue to the back, which I already have. It's hard to see there, but it'll make it stay in better since we can't put the back on. So for the eyes, we're going to go 3 down. So there's 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put it in this hole here, and this is where the bottom of the eye meets the middle of the nose. And then we're going to go 3 down here. There's 1, 2, 3, and we're going to put in our eye. So once we have them pushed in, we're ready to work on our whiskers. For our whiskers, we're going to go 2 rows from the eyes. So we're going to start here where the middle of the ear is, and we're going to go into this stitch, which is 2 rows from the eyes. And then I'm going to go back into the middle stitch, and I'm going to go up 1. So we're going to skip this one and go into this one up here. And for this one, we're not going to go straight, but we're going to go 1 above. So we're going to go into this stitch way up here. And then we're going to go back to the bottom, and we're going to skip the 2 rows here. So we're at the bottom whisker, and then we're going to go down 1 row. So we're going to go down 1 row to here, and then we're going to go back up into the middle. So here we have our 3 whiskers. And then we're just going to tie a knot here. And we're going to cut this off. And then we're just going to tuck in our knot. And we're done with the whiskers on her left side, and now we're going to do her right side, which is our left side. And here we're finished with the other side of the whiskers, and now we're ready to work on the bow and her headband. So now we're going to make the horns for our headband. We're going to start with 4 chains. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4 chains. And then in this stitch here, we're going to do a slip stitch. So we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull through 1, and pull through 2. And then in our next stitch, we're going to do a single crochet. And then in our last stitch here, another single crochet. And then we're done with our little horn here. We're going to pull out our yarn, and then we're going to attach this to our headband. And we want to make 2 horns. And now we're going to make the headband for our horns. We're going to start with a slip knot, and we're going to make 18 chains. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we're going to continue this until we get to the end. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and here we're on our 18th chain. And then we're going to start with our single crochets. There's 1, 2, 3, and we're going to continue making these until we have 17 single crochets. And here we're on our 17th single crochet, and that completes our headband. We're going to cut our yarn and then pull it through. And then we're going to tie a knot at the end. And I'm going to cut the smaller tail off. And here I'm going to add a tail on the other side. I'm just going to put it into that bottom loop and then just tie a knot. And then I'm just going to cut off the smaller tail. And then we're going to add our horns to this headband. And now we're ready to add our horns to our headband. And we want to make sure that we're on the correct side. The wrong side up, or you can use it this side up too, but you'll see that there are 2, I guess, pairs of stitches that you can see together, and if you turn it a certain way, it'll look like a pie symbol. So this is our correct side up, and we're going to count 5 stitches down. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's our 5th stitch. So I'm going to put a stitch marker here. And then I'm going to count from this side 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I'm going to add a different stitch marker. And so now we're going to get our horn. So we're going to start with this side. And so here I have the stitch marker in the 5th stitch, so I'm going to put this tail, this side's tail, into this stitch here. I'm going to move the stitch marker out now. And then I'm going to take this other tail, and then I'm going to skip a stitch here, and I'm going to put it in this stitch. Then I'm just going to tie the bottoms together into a knot. I'm going to cut it shorter. So here we have our first horn on. So now we're ready to put our other horn onto our headband. We're going to put our darning needle on this side of the horn. And we're going to place it into the stitch where our stitch marker is. And once it's in there, we're going to remove the stitch marker. Then we're going to put the darning needle on the other side. We're going to skip the next stitch and then put it into the following stitch. Then we're going to tie the ends together and make it into a knot. And then we're going to cut both sides. And here we're finished with putting both of our horns onto the headband. And in between the headband, we should have 3 open crochets. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And we're ready to sew this onto our Hello Kitty. So now we're ready to sew our headband onto Hello Kitty. We're going to place our first stitch right next to the top whisker, right here. And then we're just going to go back into the stitch. So then it's secured around the stitch. And then we're going to move on to the other side. We're going to place the stitch right next to the top whisker. So in this stitch here, and then we're just going to go back into the stitch here. To secure it. Let's check if the headband looks okay. I think that's how it's supposed to look. And then tuck these into the head. To make our bow, we're going to start with 16 chains. We're going to make our slip knot and start our 16 chains. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So then we're going to make triple crochets. So we're going to do 2 yarn overs, and then not on this first chain, the second chain, but in this third chain, we're going to place our hook through there. Then we're going to pull through, then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through another 2, then yarn over and pull through the last 2. So we're going to continue making these triple crochets until we reach the end of the row. So again, yarn over twice, insert the hook, yarn over, pull through that first little chain, yarn over, then pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through another 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the last 2 loops. One, 2, yarn overs, insert the hook, yarn over, pull through the chain, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through another 2 loops, yarn over, and pull through the last 2 loops. So we're going to continue to do that until we reach the end of the row. And here we're on our last triple crochet. And then once we're finished with our row of triple crochets, we're going to pull our yarn through. Then we're going to cut it. And then we're going to fold it so that we meet in the back here. And then we're going to sew the two ends together. And here I got looser with the stitches so that we can make the bow where the top part is larger than the bottom part, like Hello Kitty's bow. So they're not going to match up perfectly, so we're going to just sew them together. We have our darning needle, and we're going to go into the stitch here. Then we're just going to go into the next stitch, into this next stitch here. And then into this top stitch. Into this top stitch here. Then we have them together. And we can just go back down. And then just tie them together. And here we can use our ends to tie the bow together and to put it onto her head. So we can just tie this bow here in half. Then tie it in a knot. And then we're going to make the middle. For the middle of the bow, we're going to make 4 chains. So we're going to start with our slip knot, and we're going to do 4 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to cut our yarn, pull out our end, then we're going to get our bow. We're just going to tie it in the middle here. And I cut these ends off so we can use these ends on the middle. And then we're just going to tie it in the knot. And now we're ready to sew our bow onto our Hello Kitty. So now we're ready to add our bow. And we're going to put it in front of the headband. So I already put this tail and this tail under the first set of stitches on each side. So we're going to add the bottom in front of the headband. So I'm going to go right in front of this top whisker and that stitch here. And then I'm going to go back into the bow. I'm going to go through the middle here. For the top part of the bow, we're going to go into the headband. So we're going to go into the headband right in front of the horn, in front of this stitch here, and then back through. And then we'll go back through the middle here. And then we'll tie our knot. And now we're ready to make the eye patch. Now we're going to make the heart for the eye patch. We're going to start with a magic circle, and you can check out the short for a clearer version on how to make the magic circle. And here we basically have a chain 1 with our magic circle, and so we're going to add 3 more. There's 1, 2, and 3 more chains. And then here on our first stitch inside the magic circle, we're going to do a triple crochet. So there's 1 and 2 yarn overs. Then we're going to go inside the circle, yarn over, pull through the circle, and then we should have 4 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over, pull through 2 loops, then yarn over, pull through another 2 loops, then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. And next we're going to do a double crochet. So that's a yarn over, insert into the circle, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the last 2 loops. And then we're going to do a chain 1, and then we're going to do another triple crochet. So there's 1, 2, insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through another 2 loops, then yarn over and through the last 2 loops. Then we're going to do another chain 1, and this will be working on our other side now. So we're going to do a double crochet. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2. Then we're going to do a triple crochet. There's 1, 2 yarn overs, insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through another 2 loops, if I can get it through, then yarn over and through the last 2 loops. And then we're going to do 4 chains because we're at the end and we started with 4 chains. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 chains. And then we're going to do a slip stitch into our magic circle. So we're going to go inside the magic circle, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through the loop. So now we're going to bring our heart together. Looks kind of like a weird heart, but when you pull the end, it all comes together. And you can see the heart. So I'm going to cut off our yarn and then pull it through. And then I'm going to pull the tail from the middle to close up the heart. And then we're going to take our darning needle and take this tail from our 4 chains. And then we're going to pull it to the back. So here we have the tail, and we're going to pull it to the back and into this bottom loop here. So it's right before the crochets, just in the bottom loop. And then we could bring this one back down. And here we could tie them together in the middle. and then cut the ends off. And now we're done with our heart that we're going to use as our eye patch. So now we're going to work on the purple that goes around the heart. It's supposed to look like lace, but ours is just going to look like stitches. So we're going to start by going through the middle here. And we're going to grab our yarn and pull it through. Once we have our yarn through, we're going to go through the back loops of the stitches. So here's the back loop of this very first one. It's very tiny. And then here we're going to do a slip stitch. So then we're going to do the same on our next stitch. So here's our next stitch here. We're going to yarn over, pull through, and then pull through for a slip stitch. And then we're going to get this back stitch here on our next stitch. Yarn over, pull through, and pull through the next loop for a slip stitch. So we're going to look for the back stitch for each one of our stitches here. Go through it, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through to make a slip stitch. Now it's getting easier. We could see them easier now. So we're going to make these slip stitches in that top stitch of our heart. And here we're at the bottom of the heart, so I'm going to do a slip stitch and then another slip stitch. And then we're going to go back into that next stitch, do a slip stitch, then through our other one. I'm just going to continue to make these slip stitches using only that back stitch. And this looks like that's our last one. And then we're going to go back into the middle here. Yarn over, pull through, and then make the last slip stitch into that same middle stitch. Then we're going to cut our yarn, pull it through, and then here we're going to put it back into the hole with our darning needle. So we're going to put it back through that hole, and then we have our heart. We're going to just tie this in the back here. Just make a knot. Then we're going to cut it. And here we're done with our heart for our little eye patch. For the band, for the eye patch, we're going to do 45 chains. We're going to start with our slip knot and do 45 chains. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're just going to continue this until we have 45 chains. And once we have our 45 chains, we're going to cut our yarn. We want to cut it a little bit long, basically the same size as this side. Then we're going to pull it out. And here in the middle of this, we're going to add our eye patch. So we can just fold this, and then this will be the middle right here. So we can add, I'm just going to put the darning needle here. And then we're going to get our eye patch. So here's our eye patch. And you can either sew it on here or glue it on or do both. So if we're going to sew it on, we're going to have to get some yarn. So I'm just going to glue this on. Now that we're done with our eye patch, we're going to add it to our Hello Kitty. So we're going to put one strap below the top of the ear and this one below the middle. And then we're going to just tie it in the back. And here you can tie it into a bow, or you can just tie it into a knot. So here you can make a knot so it stays together pretty good. Or you can also make a bow. And that way you can take it off easier. And then just cut the ends. And so now we're done with our eye patch. And if you didn't glue your eyes on, you can also remove the eye underneath, but you know, just in case if I want to remove the eye patch, I'm going to leave the eye under here rather than take it off. To make our wing, we're going to start with 12 chains. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. For our first stitch, we're going to do a slip stitch in this first chain. And next, we're going to do 3 double crochets in the next 3 chains. So we're going to yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the last 2 loops. Again, yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through the last 2 loops. And here we're on our last double crochet. And we're ready to move on to our next stitches. So the next 2 are going to be 2 single crochets. So there's 1 and 2 single crochets. Then we're going to skip 2 of the stitches. There's 1, 2 stitches, and then we're going to do 3 single crochets. There's 1, 2, and 3 single crochets. By skipping those 2 stitches, it gave us that little bump on the wing. For our next row, we're going to do a chain 1. We're going to turn our work. Then we're going to skip this very first stitch here, and then we're going to do 3 single crochets. So there's 1, 2, and 3 single crochets. And then we're going to skip a chain here, and then we're going to do 3 single crochets. So there's 1, 2, and 3 single crochets. For our next row, we're going to do a chain 1, turn our work, and then we're going to skip this very first stitch here. And then in the next stitch, we're going to do a slip stitch. And then we're going to do a slip stitch again. and then we're going to do a single crochet. We're going to skip a stitch, and then we're going to do a single crochet, and then 2 chains. So there's 1 and 2 chains, and then we're going to do a slip stitch in that same chain that we're working on. So we're back into the same chain, and then we're going to do a slip stitch. And this makes the other little point on the wing. And then we're going to do another slip stitch here in the next stitch. And then we're going to do a single crochet going upwards here, and this is the base of the wing. In the next stitch, we're going to do a single crochet, and then in this final stitch up in the corner, we're going to do a slip stitch. Then we're going to cut our yarn, pull our yarn through, and then we're going to tie these 2 ends at the corner into a knot. Here we're finished with our wing. We can use these to sew on our wings, or we can just cut them off. And we're going to make 2 of these wings, but we're going to just make one type. So one side will have this pattern on there, and then the other side will have this pattern. Now we're going to add our wing to the kitty. So we're going to go 1, 2, and 3 rows down. So in these 2 rows, and then we're going to go into the wing in this corner here. And then we're going to go back into the same row and into the next stitch on the body. Going back into the next stitch, and then into this stitch of the body. And then we're going to go into the wing. So we're going to go into this bottom, very bottom stitch here. Let's see. So in this here, so this stitch here of the wing. Let's tighten that up. And then we're going to go into the body, just in the next 2 stitches here. Then we're going to go into this last stitch on the wing. And then back into the body. And here we're just going to pull our yarn through the bottom here. Stitch came out. And then we'll just tighten up this wing. And cut this off. And then we can just put this end down into the body. And then we can just cut off both of the ends. And then we're finished with adding on the wings. So basically we're done with our Hello Kitty as a vampire. Just need to add that back on here. So once we have our wings attached, we're done with Hello Kitty Vampire, and we just need her little staff. And if we want her to fly this way, we're going to move the wings where this arm is, and we're going to put the arms forward, and we're going to move the leg. But this is her just standing as a regular doll. For her staff, I made a heart using the heart pattern without the purple on the sides. And then I have a toothpick that I put through the yarn, the tube of the yarn, and then I'm just going to stick it right in here in this triple crochet. And there we have her heart staff. Here we have our Hello Kitty and her staff. We can just stick that in her hand there. And we're finished with our Hello Kitty vampire costume with the eye patch. She can do her magic. To make Hello Kitty fly, we're going to put her arms to the side. I already have the back arm on, and then we're just going to do this front arm. So I'm going to put the yarn through one stitch, and then I'm going to go down the other stitch, and then I'm just going to place it into these two stitches right under her nose. We're going to skip one row and go into this row, and then go into the next. And then we're going to go back into the arm here, and then go back down. And then we're going to pull both sides of our yarn to tighten it. And then we're just going to tie a knot at the bottom. And then we could just tuck in these ends here. So we'll just go down through the body. And here we can just cut the ends off. Just press it down. And then we're done with adding her arm. And then we're going to put her little wand in her hand. Next, we're going to work on the wing. We're going to insert our yarn in this corner here. So then we have both sides with the tail of the yarn. So I'm going to go into this front tail. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 stitches from the arm, and then I'm going to go into these 2 stitches here. I'm going to take the other end and then put it down into that same hole, up the same one. go back through the wing on that corner with this end, and then I'm just going to tie them together. I'm not going to go down through the whole thing like we did on the back. This should be enough to hold it in place. And then we'll just tuck the ends in. And we'll go through the body. And then go down through the body. And then we can just cut the yarns off. Oops. So we're done with one of the wings, and we're going to do the same with the other side. And here I sewed on the other wing, so we have both of our wings on, and then we just need the legs. For the legs, we're going to sew the top together. So through here, and through the next stitch, and then the next stitch here. Then I'm going to go down one. So now that we have this leg sewn together, I'm going to cut the other end. So once we have our leg sewn together, we're going to place it in the middle, and we're going to sew the leg down. Here we have the darning needle, and we're going to go into the stitch right in front of the middle here, and then we're going to go into the leg, and then back to the next stitch here, going outwards from the middle, pull it through, and then we're going to go into the next stitch in the leg, and then back down into the next stitch here, and then we're going to tie these two ends together. And then into a knot. So we have our leg on, and then it kind of goes in an angle. And then we're going to sew the next one right next to it, right over here. And we're going to tuck these ends in. And then the next one. And then we're going to cut these off. So we're done with our first leg, and then we're just going to add our next leg right next to it. So I finished sewing on the other leg. So we have our two little dangly legs as she flies, and then we're just going to add the staff. And now we have Hello Kitty flying in the air like a bat.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our second part of how to crochet a Hello Kitty Vampire keychain. If you found our tutorial helpful, please hit that thumbs up button. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Also hit the notification bell so you know when our next tutorial is out. Have a wonderful day.